once again. So my name is George Tortorelli from Gainesville, Florida, and my company is called Medicinewind Music, and it has to do with the healing effects of not only breathing when you play, but the sound itself. So the combination of breathing and hearing the flute music is a really potent medicine. And I've been doing it for over 50 years. So rewinding the tape, but way back in the early 70s, I was a rock and roll bass player. And I played clubs and everything all around Miami, and I was a lead singer, and I was loving it, you know. It was a great life. Zeppelin and Hendrix and all that. And one day I was at this hippie commune on the beach, and we were all partying out, and I'm laying back on this bed, and this girl drops the needle on this album, and all of a sudden this ethereal flute music comes out, and I'm like, what? And I sat up like, what is that? And it turned out to be an album called Paul Horn and the Taj Mahal. And he's a famous flute player who went to India in the 60s to study transcendental meditation with the Maharishi. And when he gets there, lo and behold, who's there? But the Beatles and Donovan and a bunch of other stars. And so that's awesome just in itself. But then he takes a side trip to the Taj Mahal. And as part of the tour guide comes in and he gives a big long Om. Om. And it echoes like unbelievable through the dome. And he was like, oh my God, I have to come back here with my flute. And so he came back that night with his flute and a recording engineer friend and a little battery-powered reel-to-reel tape recorder. And he recorded the whole session. And he brought it back to LA and just played it for his friends at parties, you know, and they were all like, oh my God, you need to release this. This is unreal, you know? And he said, oh, I just got it as a souvenir, you know? And he finally was convinced, and he went to his record company and played him the album, and they were like, where's the beat? And where's the melody? Like, what? Because they couldn't wrap their head around that concept of just like ethereal, floating, improvised music. And so he said, trust me, it's the 60s, dude. I mean, this is happening, you know? And so they said, all right, we'll make 500 copies and see how it goes. And they just flew off the shelf, like immediately. And he was like, see? So it came out and it was a smash success. And he went on to do a whole series of the Inside series. Taj Mahal, Great Pyramid, all kinds of places. And so when I first heard those first few notes, I mean, I literally felt like an activation. I was like, psh, what? And I went home and I found my spent all night looking for this little recorder from second grade. And I still found it in a little box. And I just spent all night listening to Stairway to Heaven that has those beautiful recorders at the beginning. And I stayed up till dawn, and I finally figured it out. I was like, oh, that's how you get that note, and that's how you do that. So I was transfixed by the recorder for a while. And then I finally stumbled upon a flute maker in Miami Beach in the early 70s, and I got my first bamboo flute. And then I was like getting burned out on rock and roll scene and the city life and everything. And I moved up to Gainesville, Florida, deep in the forest, down a dirt road in a little tin roof shack. And I would sit there by the fire and I'd be playing my flutes. And I go, wow, that's the note of that bird, whoa. And that's the note of those crickets, what? And I started just totally deeply connecting with Mother Nature and the wind, you know. And then I started planting some bamboo, and I loved it so much. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait a minute, I could make a bamboo flute. And so I just spent months around the fire with these hot metal rods, burning holes in there, trying to get it, you know. And I had a real good feel for it, and it took a while, but I finally started making some really good flutes. And then I started doing my first art festivals, selling flutes, and it worked really good. And then I was like, I'm quitting my job. So I quit my job, jumped off the cliff, flapped my wings, faltered a little. I mean, first couple of months I had change in my pocket to buy rice and beans at the co-op, you know. And bit by bit, I started recording, and it was the beginning of New Age music, and those recordings went really well, and the flutes totally went well. And now I've been doing it for 42 years, non-stop, full-time, haven't worked a job in 42 years. So I have to pinch myself like a lot. And I ended up planting a whole acre of this special bamboo with these super long joints. See this? It's a tropical variety that doesn't grow up here. So for a flute maker, that is heaven. Like to just have a long tube like that, you know? And then because I listened to so many, because of Paul Horn, I started listening to so much world flute music from India and all over. And I started to realize like, wow, no one is making flutes that play in those ancient scales. The normal flutes are just like do, re, mi, you know, your classic major flute. And so I said, man, I want some of those, you know? So same thing, I just kept listening and poking holes, and then, you know, if it didn't work out, I went back into fire, you know? And finally I came up with this whole series of raga flutes, I call them, because in India, the ancient scales are called ragas. And but again, no one has built them automatic into the flute like this. So I will give you a demonstration. Lots to choose from. So my favorite one is called the minor pentatonic. It has 4 holes, and it's like the Japanese shakuhachi or the Native American flute. It's very ancient, beautiful. So here we go. my faves. And so the classic do re mi would be this. So the thing with the major scale flute is all the scales are contained within it. Like that's all they have in India. They call them bansuris in India. But you have to know how to get there. You know, you have to know which holes to skip and which holes to cover halfway and all that. And it's very complicated. So students can spend years learning these scales. So again, I blew the lid wide open by building them in automatically. And I was once at a World Flute Conference, and a Master India Bansuri teacher came out after his workshop, and he walks by and he checks out my flutes, and he's like, "What? You're building the ragas in? You know, instant raga? What?" And he flipped out. And he called his film crew over and everything. And then he picks one up and he just shreds out on it. And we're all like, "What?" And he was like, "Look at this. We've been suffering for thousands of years. And now there's an auto raga flute," you know? So that was real vindication that I was on the right track, you know? So I'll play you, since we're speaking of India, I'll play you one of my favorites. It's called Shiva Ranjani, and it's a mysterious minor raga. And the thing with their ragas is they're specific to certain seasons and times of day. So I wish I knew, but I suspect this is like autumn or winter in the moonlight. That's what I suspect. And you're not supposed to play them at any other time, so I'm breaking some rules here, but we won't tell anyone. But the analogy that I give is like, let's say you're outside sweating to death and someone plays Jingle Bells. You're gonna go like, "What are you doing?" You know, same deal, you know? So here's Shiva Raga Shiva Ranjani. Other raga I have is called Raga Desh. And I don't know if any of you remember Within You, Without You from George Harrison and the Beatles. he totally uses this raga, and that's how I learned it. Raga Dash. Now this one's really interesting. This is called Bhairav. It's a Middle Eastern scale, and it's also called Hijaz in Israel. Totally belly dancer. Then you'll recognize. Love it. Oh, so rewinding a little bit. The man, his name is Eric, the flute maker, that sold me my first flute in probably 1973. After I was growing some bamboo for a while, I called him and I said, hey, I've got some bamboo dried, and I would love to trade you if you would make me another flute. So he said, sure, come on down. He's in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. And I get there and he's like, yeah, these are really good, great, I'll make you a flute. So he makes me a flute, and while he's making it, I'm telling him like, and then the wind blew when I played this note, and then, you know, I'm just going off on my experiences, and he's going, whoa, we got a real live one here, you know? And then he started making something. I didn't know what he was doing. He's like drilling and sanding and doing all this stuff. And then he puts these little rods in a piece of velvet and wraps it up with a little bow on it. And then he comes up and he presents it to me, and it's the rods to burn the holes in the bamboo to make flutes. He knew that I was there, you know? And he presents it to me, and I'm like, what? And then he puts his hands on my head, and he says, Lord, make him an instrument of thy peace. And I just got total shush, electric, unbelievable, you know? So I have to thank him all the time for like changing my life in a big way, you know? So thank you, Eric. So we have, okay, we got those. So this is a really rare flute. It's not India, it's Romanian, and it's copied from a flute called a kaval, which is blown from the end. And a friend of mine had like a tourist cavale that was really beautifully painted and carved and everything, and I could see where the holes were, and it barely played, but I could hear what it was trying to say. I could hear the scale, you know, and so I said, give me some paper dolls, you know, and a marker, and I laid it down and I put where all the holes were and everything. And then instead of the whistle end, I put the side blown hole. And so as far as I know, this is the only side blown cavale ever. And it's really, the Romanian shepherds would use it. It's a Romanian shepherd's flute. So I also have a deeper Native American pentatonic, which is really one of my faves. It's a low A minor. Like that. So then I was, wow, you know, you can only make a flute so big because your fingers are only so long. So I was trying to make a bass flute. And then I realized, like, you know, the spread between these first and third fingers can only go that far, you know, so the flute would be like, you know, shorter. And then one day I realized, like, wait a minute, look at that stretch instead of that stretch, you know? And I was like, oh my God. So look, boom, thumb, forefinger, thumb, forefinger. Crazy. So you will not believe this. So we're gonna do our final little meditation, so you can feel free to close your eyes, whatever you want. questions? Any answers? So all these are available at my table to the far right there, and I have some recordings of that, exactly this vibe of that last flute. And come get a card and so you can see a bunch of videos of me doing that live and whatever. And thank you so much for coming.